Good evening, folks. India time. Good evening, folks. Eastern time, East Asian time, including in Thailand and Seoul, from where we have our eminent distinguished guests for the day today. This is the Opto Politics Hour, wherein we'll discuss about Opto Politics as arising out of the first Quad summit, which was held yesterday between the Quad leaders, the heads of states, governments of the United States, India, Australia, and Japan. This is quite a milestone. And to understand what could be the implications or nuances of this development, we have with us two distinguished panelists with whom we'll be discussing today. I have with us Dr. Lane Hartsell, a research professor from the Center of Ethics in Science and Technology at the Chulalongkorn University of in Bangkok. We have with us Dr. Lakhvinder Singh, a professor, expert on geopolitics and East Asian affairs from Seoul. If there's any sound disturbances, I think any of us are getting pleased because there appears to be some scratchy sound, which is the nature of technology sometimes. I hope it's clear. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. The topic of the day, as we are looking at, is, post the summit of the core leaders yesterday, what now next in terms of implications for the national and local economies, for the military balance, for the supply chains, and peace in the Indo-Pacific. The discussion will proceed in rounds, and of course, folks, this is going Facebook Live and also LinkedIn Live. Please bring in your questions, and we'll be happy to take your comment with our distinguished panel. May I now invite for the opening round Dr. Lakhvinder Singh for your overall perspective, reflection on the development of yesterday, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for having me today for such an important webinar. I'm going to sound a little bit disappointment, even though it's a very good opportunity to start such an important summit, which we was waiting for a long time. But as a whole, I'm not impressed what's being done. My expectation was much more than I got yesterday. So when I listened to our Prime Minister, he was very, very subdued and controlled. He was talking about vaccine, climate change, and emerging technology, and open Indo-Pacific. And he was talking about public good. I felt somewhere there is a restraint. They don't want to use the word China. Even though Quad was specially designed to deal with the rise of China. But yesterday, I found them lacking to addressing the problem head on. So I'm a little bit disappointed from the speeches which was given yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Lakhvinder. That's an interesting point that you make, that you were disappointed. But perhaps was it not in the nature of diplomacy? I mean, at the initial stages, not to name the gorilla in the room. So, but that fair enough is your perspective. We look forward to further discussion. There appears to be some echo in our system. Perhaps if you can please check if there is an echo, if something could be done or looked at. Thank you so much. May I now invite Dr. Lane Hartsell for his opening thoughts and comments on the topic of the day, sir.
Yes, well, particularly I was interested in the technology-related aspects. So when we're dealing with the pandemic, vaccines, multiple vaccines and out now, and then others coming that can deal with the variants and the complexities that we're dealing with, I thought that while it may be somewhat problematic, the overall political situation, when I think about just the technologies and the necessity of these countries meeting, I'm positive in this respect. Now, we can get more into what can happen in the distribution of the vaccines, but I looked at it positively. But I understand Professor Singh's concerns.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. Okay, so now we come back to Dr. Singh. Would you like to go into deeper as to why you are disappointed or why this
Okay.
is not measured up to your?
My point is this: we have a lot of platforms, lot of institutions where we can talk about vaccine, climate change, and other things. Quad was specially designed to address security issues and to address the balance of power. It was basically security dialogue, and changing balance of power. We should not dilute the main purpose, main agenda of this dialogue, particular dialogue. We are connected with USA, with Australia, with Japan, with many institutions, with many platforms. But this particular agenda, institutional platform, is especially designed to address the balance of power and the security issues. And yesterday, what was happening? Both President Biden and our Prime Minister Modi was trying to avoid that particular issue. Now we have to address this balance of power head on. We cannot hide ourselves under the vaccine, or that we are uniting for vaccine, we are uniting for climate change. No, of course we are uniting, but we have different platforms for that. We already have a lot of institutions, a lot of bodies to address those issues, and we are already cooperating. This platform is specially designed for security. And especially designed how to address the rise of China. The more we try to dilute it, the more we try to hide it, the more we hurt ourselves, the more we help China. So we have to accept the reality that balance of power is happening, that China is advancing too much into our territory, into area of concern. Until we don't face the reality head on, we are going to mess up with a lot of things. So we should keep the things. Climate change can be addressed at other platforms. Vaccine distribution can be addressed at other platforms. We don't need to mix it up. Yesterday was a day for addressing security issues. How to deal with the rise of China in the Asia-Pacific. What to do with the expanding Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean. Those issues are real issues. And our leaders were trying to avoid them.
Is it only me or the broadband? Yeah, Dr. Singh, you're back. Yeah, you were kind of, you're back, please. Okay, thank you very much.
My concern is that until we look for new policies, new strategies to face the new ground reality regarding China, we are just fooling ourselves. We are going away from the main topic. We should be very honest to ourselves. Yesterday, both President Biden and our Prime Minister didn't use the word China. So they're trying to hide themselves. Why? Do you think Chinese don't know what is happening? Chinese know. We are uniting under this platform to expand the influence, to stop the expanding influence of China. So we have to be, to some extent, to be honest and brave to control Chinese behavior. Until we don't do it, we are just hiding behind some nice words, nice converts. I think time has come when President Biden should clear his policy towards China. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Yes, I do. An interesting point you make, and I would invite Dr. Hartzell Lane to kind of, put his views as to what his take on your opinion is. Lane, what would you say to what Dr. Robinder Singh is saying? Please.
Yes, I'm in agreement with Dr. Singh. He's far more qualified to talk about the geopolitical strategic situation. But the case where, say, the Chinese Navy is sailing close to Taiwan, or in the near the Philippines waters, or with the Japanese islands, and so forth and so on. This kind of situation needs to be addressed, I think, by the world community, the UN Security Council, and so forth, as that goes. Now, I think that the situation in India, I get my information from Professor Singh and other analysts like that. I look at Ian Brimmer's work and so forth. So I'm certainly not in a position to comment on the conflict there, but I am glad to see that there's some resolution apparently. And as far as the Quad and say counteracting the balance of power or trying to balance power in Indo-Asia. Indo-Asia is an interesting concept, by the way. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think that there should be some balance of power. The Chinese say that this is limiting their ambitions, but they don't specify what those ambitions are. Are the ambitions military power, like hard power? Is this a soft power kind of thing? I call it integral power, where you have knowledge and trade and technology and all of that together, and you have cooperation largely. So it depends on what the concepts are, but certainly there should be a balance of power, and I think that Australia and Japan and India and the United States should be working together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hafsir. In fact, that was also going to be my question before we move on to the next round. Dr. Singh is taking a view that the Quad mechanism was or is meant to be for security alone, and for other aspects, there are other platforms or combinations of, to take it forward. However, given the world in which we live today, isn't economic or economies linked to the very idea of security itself? For example, in the Quad, like now you have two nations which are part of the RCEP with China, right? So the economies are, everybody's economy is so much entangled. If your economies are so much entangled, how will you disentangle before you get into a military, face off? So I would think, from my perspective, and we'll go into that now, would be that economics, given the world of today, would be an equal. There'll be two legs on which security has to stand: military balance as well as economy. That being said, Dr. Singh, may I now move to the next question for you, please, sir? And folks, whosoever is watching it is going Facebook Live right now on the Imagine India Facebook page, and the LinkedIn page. Put in your questions. We'll be happy to take your questions. We've got two distinguished scholars and analysts who are analyzing the Quad summit of yesterday and what its impact or outcomes or perceptions would be therein. Thank you so much. Dr. Lakwinder Singh, my question to you is that, for a moment, if we can keep the aspect of security aside, which you are wanting to highlight, fair enough. Would you like to comment, or what is your view that what would be the impact on the economies as a result of the outcome or the trajectory which seems to be moving? What would be the impact on the economies of the Quad countries, their supply chains? Do you see them getting linked better, closer, as the discussion is with vaccines, or as the discussion, I would say, after the vaccines, the next thing could be rare earths or batteries or whatever be energy security areas? How do you see the development of yesterday, kind of moving in that direction, please, sir?
Again, here also I was disappointed. I was expecting that they will take the cooperation to next level, even in economic terms, even in supply chains. As you know, they have set up this what they call it, this Highland Supply Chain Initiative, what is called RSCI. It's a very very complicated concept. It looks very good, but so far they have failed to fill anything concrete into this initiative. So far, they have filled this concept with the geopolitical ideas. But if we really want to refocus and train our supply chains, we have to build the needed infrastructure to take our dependence from China to other countries. Here, I was looking into what they are going to do. Actually, going to do. There are a lot of issues before we can take our supply chains from China to other countries. So, currently, if you study clearly, you'll see that a lot of empty talk are there, nothing concrete being proposed. It's not easy to move the supply sources from China to regional countries, because by the end of the day, cost efficiency is the real thing. And who's going to take the cost? Can USA take the cost to move the supply chains from China to regional countries? So until they come out with a practical proposal, that this can be done, this kind of taxes, this kind of investment proposal, this kind of dispute settlement. Lot of things needs to be done. I have more than 20 things need to be done according to I have counted. Before that, supply chains can become functional outside China. So yesterday I was watching very closely what steps they are going to take to smoothen the process of supply chain. Again, they were just empty. So, question is, to whom we are fooling? None, only ourselves. It's not easy to move away from China. From the economic ground, from geopolitically, we can say we want to move from China. That's fully understood. But what do we bring on the ground? What kind of measure we are you take? What kind of initiative? What kind of taxes? What kind of incentives we are going to give to the companies to move outside China? It's not easy for any country. Like it was, what kind of things India can supply to these 3-4 countries? No, we don't have much infrastructure building. Until USA, Japan, Australia help us to build our supply chains, we cannot be any meaningful partner in the Quad, in the economic sense. Same
Sure,
thing with Japan and Australia.
sure,
Things are so expensive, we cannot buy from them immediately, directly. So
sure.
my point is this: that's very good idea. Very good. Geopolitically, I want to detach our economy from China. They are one of the strong proponent from that. But on the practically, we have to start trusting each other. We have to start giving them each other more opportunity. So we have to start doing what I call strategic investing, strategic buying from each other. Sometimes we should buy from each other, not only just because it's expensive. It is cheaper because it is better to buy from China. Better to buy from India than China. So strategic buying is very important, and strategic investing is very important. 4 issues which I want to emphasize is petrochemicals and electronics and automobiles. These areas where we should invest more, where China is too much, we are dependent too much on China. So
Hmm.
unless we
Sure,
identify areas and do something practical on the ground, this so-called supply chain is just an empty talk. So
sure.
yesterday
Thank you.
during the summit, nothing much
Sure,
came out. Yes.
sure. Thank you, Dr. Singh. I mean, a great point you're making. And as you're talking, of course, we had a viewer from the US, Tim Sohn. He says, "Hi, Robinder. Greetings from the US." Tim, thank you so much. I guess you're logging in from Pennsylvania, right? So thank you so much for watching by. Please feel free to put in a question, and I'm sure our distinguished panel will be more than happy to take in your questions, sir. Thank you once again for coming by. Please share this feed with your friends and family also, and we'll be happy to have engagement from our guests or viewers. Now, Dr. Singh, as you were mentioning, I do get your point in terms of what is the exact one could be. I would think, and that will lead me to the question with Dr. Hartzell. The point is, let's say the vaccine as a case study, right? It's not about displacing maybe supply chains. In the case of the COVID vaccine, the talk is about creating a new supply chain altogether, wherein the idea is supposedly that, see, the technology, quote unquote, will be from the United States. The financing, quote unquote, would be from Japan with JICA or JBIC or whatever. The manufacturing implementation would be organized here in India, and what Australia contributes would be something also. So, in a sense, this could be a case study, a first case study of standing up a supply chain. And leading to that, now my question coming to Dr. Lane is, if let's say this COVID vaccine supply chain can become a reality, do you see such supply chains arising, especially let's say in sunrise sectors or needs like especially electric vehicles or especially let's say batteries?
Good question. Well, okay, we'll take the vaccines because that's the most pressing issue that most people probably watching are going to wonder about. As you know, even if we had the vaccines, they have to be distributed. So we can have wonderful technology, science, but if you can't get the vaccines out, it's going to be a mess. And well, that's pretty much what we're in right now. President Biden and Vice President Harris are in a situation where they've inherited a system that a previous administration that basically eliminated the pandemic response team and the scientific board and so forth behind that, along with decreasing the powers of the CDC, so much so that there was an article, I think, this week in the Financial Times that said that something like the fall of the CDC. At the time when a pandemic's coming on, this is, well, it's insane. And they've inherited a system now with hundreds of thousands of deaths related to COVID. More on the way. We are seeing a decrease in numbers of hospitalizations, but again, a very, very dire and severe situation. And so they're in a situation where the vaccines are going to have to go to do something about the system in the United States. And there's another system, there's another country also, Brazil, that's the system's in collapse related to health, the healthcare system. Both of these countries are going to need, maybe even outside assistance, particularly Brazil. Now, moving across the globe into, say, what they typically call the global south, yes, there's certainly a lot of need there. And there's a hoarding of vaccines. So there's what we see in the what you'll see in the world today is this thing called vaccine diplomacy and then hoarding vaccines. So the vaccine diplomacy has come about, particularly China's been doing pretty well with this. There was a push within the COVAX system, which is trying to get vaccines out, that can allow for more of a fast track into a generic vaccine system. This was blocked by the United States, Britain, and the usual very rich countries, which is a serious problem. This has to be dealt with. So this is the situation politically and medically or public health-wise of what's going on. Now, the people that are on the front lines, the elderly, people that already have some type of predisposition genetically, people who are already sick, these should be the first people that are getting the vaccines and then moving down and stepwise from that. If we look in the media, yes, that's being done. But when we look at the studies, it's kind of a piecemeal kind of thing. It's not consistent enough. It's not standardized enough. So there's a lot of problems there, and that's got to be cleaned up. So it's in quite a bit of a mess, and I don't want to make it look look very good or bright at the moment. I do think that something can be done politically. President Biden has moved to do something like 2 million vaccines, along with India, something coming up. There's talk about this, but again, we need to see what happens there. And then working with, say, China and Russia with the vaccines and getting these out. There shouldn't be political issues played there. It should be a matter of public health. And I do want to mention in Thailand, there's a vaccine on the way here, which is good to hear for Thailand. I wanted to mention them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. We'll come back. It seems we got a little bit, we've slided a bit into the vaccine topic, and we've had some people. Sure. But I mean, it's relevant. Tim was asking, I wonder when there will be a vaccine, a COVID vaccine for children. Tim, we have experts on geopolitics and international security. So my guess, at least on the vaccine, would be as good as yours, or as a guess we may have. Tim also says, I got my first Moderna vaccine shot the other day due to immune issues. My wife, a teacher, is getting hers soon. I'm surprised teachers have not gotten higher priority. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining in. The topic of the day is actually the Quad, the 4 countries of United States, Japan, India, and Australia getting together to discuss in unsaid manner ways to contain the aggressive rise of China. That's the big picture topic of the day. Now, coming to Dr. Lakhvinder Singh. Dr. Singh, we'll come back to the issue of security and pure military balance, which was your expectation as an outcome from the discussion of yesterday.
No. Even to counter China, growing China's economic influence in the region, we are not coming out with any concrete strategy.
Fair enough. Exactly. So that's my question now. Because this is around on economics, right? The economics and supply chains. So in this, and also we go to factor in how would the ASEAN countries and other countries, work in this whole matrix of trade and economics. So what is your take on that, and what would you have liked, let's say? Suppose if I were to put you in the shoes of, let's say, the Prime Minister of India, X, for example, what would you have wanted coming out of this meeting? Or
Okay,
what
very
would
well.
you have
So,
gone into the meetings wanting to get out from this meeting as the Prime Minister of India, Dr. Singh?
okay, let first
Role play.
first we as a first we have to accept China is using its economic strength to expand influence. So China's strategy to expand its influence is economic, basically, not military. China is not using military to expand itself. China is using its economic power to expand itself. So we have to come out with a counter strategy. And counter strategy has to be economic. Now, so far we have come out with two strategies. One is this resilient, initiative, and second is what we call a blue dot network. I have already pointed out the shortcomings of the this resilient initiative. Where we have failed to come out with any practical ideas where we can replace our supply chains from China to regional countries. Now I will tell you what we are doing wrong from the blue dot network. Now China is using these BRA projects to increase influence. It is spending a lot of money to get people closer to him. That's his idea of getting friends. Now, to counter China's influence, we have designed this kind blue dot network. Three countries, United States, Japan, and Australia, came out with the idea that we should have our own initiative through which we can also counter this China's strategy to influence real countries. Now, but the idea itself is good, but what they have put into it is very bad. Now, what they're actually doing now, they're just trying to they evaluate the project, they certified it, they give a rating to it, huh? And then but practical things not just to ratify it, certify it, study it, huh? And practical and how to arrange the funds for it. Now here
Okay.
we are lacking. Again, we are lacking now. Chinese private, the Australia, Japan, and USA are trying to use private money to counter China's government money. Here we are failing until we don't create some kind of huge fund which can match China's fund, China's money. This strategy to counter China's BRA project is not going to work. Now,
Sure.
private money always looks for profit. Profit per project may be good or bad. Until you can show the money, private money will not come here. So, but India, but
Absolutely.
in case of China always invest money without caring about the profit. So, but as a prime minister, I was looking. If I am prime minister of India, I will look for profit. But what kind of fund, what kind of money we can arrange to counter China's proposal, China's
Okay.
expanding into the region.
Great.
So far,
Thank
we have failed. Yes.
Sure. So thank you, Dr. Singh. So let's say one takeaway from you would be that if I were, let's say, India, out of these four, I would be looking at investments which will allow us to set up our own, production bases or
Yes.
interlinked production bases. Thank you so much. Now, actually, linked to this, I'll come to Dr. Lane, and I think that could be an interesting question for you, sir. See, one of the aspects on these supply chains, or even if not supply chain, technology dominance, the key for which China is looking to maybe have standards which by 2035 it will want the world to be running on, right? So the question, my question to you is that as an outcome of yesterday's Quad meeting, how much of momentum do you see in alternate technology standards coming up, or the fact that China was progressing unnoticed, unhindered towards creating its own technology dominance with its own standards? How much of that momentum of China has been roped in? What do you think with this development, sir?
Well, the technology policy of China in the past, during the massive buildup, was that you can come and set up your companies. We have workers, but we have to share the technology and the expertise, meaning that our people will be trained in that technology. We'll gain the knowledge, and then of course behind that comes our own development of technology, which is exactly what you see happening. Say with 4G, 5G, the Oppo phones, the electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. So it's China is decreasing as the manufacturing workbench of the world, and now increasing as a technology development and leader. I think that India would, if it's not cooperating with China, which I think it should, but if it's not, then that would be, of course, the way to go. As you said earlier, that technology development is it's extremely important if you want economic development. So I would argue that better cooperation with China, albeit there's a lot of problems and they need to be worked out with the Indian people. I can't really comment too much there. It's really up to you. But when it comes to technology, science, knowledge, this should be as cooperative as possible, and trade, so that you can then build up technology capacity and development in India. India has tremendous abilities, education. It's democratic. You have resources that you can access. See, this is one thing China doesn't really have. It doesn't have resources, and similar to Japan, which Japan has a resource problem too. China has a demographic problem. It's aging. India doesn't. So there's a lot of advantages that India has that could be used. Now, when it comes to military aggressiveness, yes, as I said earlier, this is going to have to be addressed by the world community, not just India itself. India can't be left alone to deal with an intrusive Chinese military. I wouldn't call it aggressive right now, but intrusive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haksal. Very well noted. And I think that those are some brilliant points that Dr. Lakhvinder Singh has made and you have made. Folks, whosoever is watching, please do put in your questions. We are live right now on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And you can see we have two distinguished speakers with us. And they are happy to share their views on any of your questions. Please keep your questions coming. I can see some likes and some views, but I don't see any questions coming in. So do keep in mind to bring in some questions. Next, may I move to Dr. Lakhvinder Singh? Yes.
I would like to add one point on technology.
Yeah, okay, let me frame the question and you can add your point to that, please. Right?
Okay.
In fact, continuing with the same question on technology, I was looking to identify more in areas of like AI, 3D, drone, right, where China is looking to establish leadership, 5G even, set up the standards, and slowly the world is using only those standards. Now, after the Quad meetings of yesterday, how much of that possibility has reduced? Now, Dr. Singh, you may please give in your views also on technology.
Again, I'm disappointed. We have to understand, China is putting a lot of public money into the new technology. That is why they are able to go ahead. But in our case, we are still depending on private technology. But private technology is not always strategic technology. It's always profit oriented. Now we are trying to fight with a partner who never care about money. They always spend money where they can have a strategic edge over USA. So Chinese always keep in mind whenever they spend money how they can defeat or overplay China. But in case of our money is going to only profit, only the future market. So our strategic thinking is much different from the Chinese thinking. Unless we started spending like China on technology, through which profit is the last thing. Developing technology itself is a goal. We cannot match China. China has spent a lot of money, public money on private technology, on new AI technology. So here is a fundamental flaw in the way. Why this explains why we are losing to China. Chinese have been able to put a lot of public money into technology, but our companies are always looking for profit, looking for funds. So that's why AI, all the major technology China is ahead of us. But yesterday, nobody was able to brave enough to accept this point that we are lagging behind China in almost all the new technologies. Yes, Professor. Yes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. But that begs a follow-on or a footnote question in the sense that while we are speaking, let's say, from the perspective of India, the Quad is not only India. When, let's say, the notion of Quad is there, it adds up to the budgets, annual budgets or whatever of these four countries. Of course, all of these are not fully aligned at all, right? Each one is doing its own game and dance. But I think that's the whole notion that if all these four countries pool in their resources, they will be able to address the very question that you are mentioning. What would you say to that?
Yes, I agree. Actually, I agree with you. But I'm proposing that we should see my plan. My plan is this: first, we should identify some strategic technologies then we should raise funds for that, and then we should try to develop those technology for public
Fair
good.
enough.
Then we
Sure.
can then we can then we can distribute among four of us.
Sure. Thank you so
So
much, Dr.
those
Singh.
that's my plan to match China or to counter China or to go ahead of China. We have to spend like China.
Beautifully said, sir. Thank you so much. Dr. Lane Hartzell, would you have a view or would you like to contribute to this point, which Dr. Lakwinder is addressing right
Yes.
now?
Well, on Professor Singh Lakvinder's last point, yes, spending on technology. That's if you just put it into one sentence, spending on technology would be right. Now, strategically, where are you going to put your money? That's another question. Earlier, when Lakvinder said, "Well, how did China get so far ahead?" Well, this is not it's not magic. It's not a secret. It's quite obvious that with the amount of foreign direct investment that was going into China and the ability for organizing, China's an old culture, thousands of years old, like India, and it has had stability, it has continuity with the past and so forth. As a center for culture and knowledge, like India, that many people in the world don't recognize that these two countries or these two modern countries were the centers of basically the center of the world for most of history. All of that is coming back right now. So the shift is not the shift to this region, this hemisphere. It should not be any real surprise. Now, how can India compete? I think that again, looking at getting into some specifics, nanotechnology, AI, and robotics, for example. All things ICT, internet, 5G. These are going to have to be, you're going to have to invest in those and also have your innovators working to bring out the cutting edge of that particular technology where it can go. So in the area of, say, nanotechnology, something like, say, piezotronics that can well, we were looking at this in Sung Kyung Kwan University that we were talking about earlier before your show, that piezotronics and different kinds of materials that can harvest more of the radiation from the sun, of the electromagnetics from the sun, than we can with silicon. That might be something to look at, and I'm sure Indian scientists are. I just want to point out a few things for your listeners. In AI and robotics, that's another big area. That's a bit further away because the technologies are fairly highly advanced, and that's going to take a lot more development. Biotechnology, we're in what some say is the golden age of biotechnology. Certainly medicines, vaccines, regenerative medicine, and all of this kind of thing, along with we need a vaccine for malaria. We need treatments for dracunculiasis, many of these tropical diseases that most of the world hasn't heard of unless they live in these regions. There's a lot to be done, and I think that the contribution of science from India, Australia, and Japan, and the United States working together which is the core of the Quad program, would bring about quite a bit of, it would be quite exciting, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. Before I move on to Dr. Lakwinder Singh, I have a quick follow-up question with you, Dr. Hartzell. But before I say that, Dr. Lakwinder Singh, the question I will come to you now would be that what do you see would be the holdbacks for Japan or Australia to contribute their fuller or more to the Quad, right? So what are the nuances, especially of Japan and Australia? I mean, America and India, we understand, but what could be the holdups for Japan and Australia to, to stand up firmer with China? Before I come to that question, and folks, please keep your comments coming. We do have a comment coming in from a viewer, Uday Sachan, saying, great. Thank you so much, Uday, for watching by, coming by. Please put in your question. Thanks so much for giving us the likes, okay? But please bring in your questions so that we can ask from a panel. Now, before I go to Dr. Singh with that question, Dr. Hartzell, I have a question with you. You study ethics in science and technology, right? Can you make some comparison with the ethics or the absence of ethics which could be happening in science and technology, which is emanating from China?
What was the last part? Which technology?
Any technologies which are emerging from China, do you see them, quote unquote, I mean, lacking ethics is a very, incorrect word, I would say, but do they not measure up to ethics in science and technology, the various technologies that China is pushing for or developing?
Well, China has in place tremendous scientific establishment, and also it has ethics institutes in place. It's an authoritarian system, so there's not going to be a lot of feedback coming from the system into the government. It's going to be more of a one-way situation. So I'm not going to be able to tell much information because simply of the type of system it is. So I'd say that's a problem in itself. In a democratic system where you have public officials and you have experts, and the experts are informing public officials, and then you have feedback from the populace, this is an entirely different kind of system. You're going to have a lot more information. It's going to look a lot messier. In a democracy like in India, as you can see, there's a lot of voices, a lot of issues. An authoritarian system is going to look a lot cleaner, but this is deceptive. I would prefer the messy systems, the argumentative systems, rather than the straight top-down system. So within that context, I think it's hard to get much information on the internal workings. Now, I do know that just looking at the journals and the information, that there is a robust system in place for dealing with this. And Premier Xi has done quite a bit to curb corruption. You'll see that there's been some crackdowns and so forth. Now, China's a huge country like India, and I don't know to the level that these crackdowns, the effect that they've had. It looks to me quite important. And how much effect this has had in, say, the technology industrial sector. Recently Jack Ma was either under house arrest or something happened that we can't quite tell, related to the technology sector and what was going on. So it looks like the government has quite a control, fairly leveraged in with the oligarchs and what they're doing. So it's really hard to tell, to be honest with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. Now may I come to Dr. Lakhvinder Singh, and looking now from the geopolitical prism, sir, what do you think would be the stances or thoughts of the Japanese leadership and the Australian leadership as they get involved more in the Quad? Because there has been talk, and we all understand, even India is hugely interlinked with China, no doubt. America itself is also, right, and Japan and Australia also are. So, how do you see the enthusiasm in Japan, especially, and also Australia, for the Quad? Or is Japan kind of just coming along for the ride till a certain point, and after a point, Japan will say, guys, you know what, I cannot go beyond this framework, or so. What are your thoughts on that? And folks, whosoever is watching, please do bring in your questions and comments. We are happy to take this on Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh.
Okay, sir. Before I answer your question, I would like to take you 1 minute, and I will stay with the technology question. I have one idea or proposal.
Sure.
So
Sure.
what I'm going to propose today is that India, Japan, and USA has complementary. We have a lot of high good scientific talent. And Japan has good universities. Good infrastructure, and Americans have funds. So if we can unite three things together, and then we can identify some good technology or future technology, which we think is very important. We should keep our edge. If we want to counter China in the future, we should develop this technology ourselves. So we should strategically develop those technology by working three classes together. India has full of scientific talent. So far we have not come to that level. We are just empty talking. So we have to identify some technology, use Indian talent, use Chinese university, use Japanese laboratories, universities, and American funds. So that kind of coordination, that kind of close cooperation between three countries needed to counter China. Until we do not do that, China will keep going ahead of us. So I'm strongly proposing that we must come out with a specific list which must not allow China to go ahead of us. We must make that list, and then we make a strategy where we will use our talent, where we will use our money, where we will use our infrastructure. So this kind of level, this kind of coordination is needed now. Situation is very grim, very very grim. I don't want to overplay it, but we have to believe, we have to accept the reality. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That having said,
Right.
okay, now I'll come back to your question now.
Japan.
Japan question, Australia question. Now, issue is this: both Japan and Australia are heavily dependent on China for economic trade. So there's especially military. Chinese Navy are moving around Japan all the way. There's limit to which Japanese can move around. So China, any strategy cannot ignore Japan's heavy dependent on trade with China. And we keep talking empty talk. We leaders keep giving speeches, but reality is that Chinese trade, Japan is heavily dependent on economic survival or economic dependence on China. So that until we decouple Japanese economy from Japan's hands are tied. So you have to accept the reality. Trade level is as high as $300 billion. So we have to accept. Now, number two, Chinese Navy. Many people don't say, but I say it. I openly say it. Today, Chinese Navy owns South China Sea. They are everywhere. They are not boasting about it, but people like me already know. It means Japan's ability to operate in South China Sea is already restrained. So Japan is now almost you can say controlled both economically as well as militarily by China. And those scholars, those professors, those politicians who don't accept this ground reality of today are just playing in the air, are playing in the chair. Chinese Navy have complete control of South China Sea, and sometimes they openly threaten. They come to Japanese islands and openly claim this is our island. This is our island. If you study Japanese news, you will see Chinese navies are coming close to Japanese islands, and they are claiming them. This is our. So now Japan's hands are being tied, both economically as well as militarily. Until we don't come to the rescue of Japan, Japan will be lost. So those people who are making a plan, talking about Quad, talking about all of the things, are refusing to accept the reality. Reality is this: that Japan, economically as well militarily, is knocked down by China. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Very interesting. And of course, I mean, yes, these are the points I think that we need to have a wider understanding of, because just assuming that, all nations will come together, and just move. I mean, each nation will have its own self-interest within this Quad mechanism, so to say. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Before I come to Dr. Lane Hartzell, we have a comment coming in from Mr. Arvind Bhatt. He's saying thanks. Thank you so much, sir. He was actually my chemistry teacher in school 45 years ago. Thank you so much, sir, for watching and your interest in these affairs. A pleasure, sir. Thank you, Arvind Bhatt, sir. That said, now, with Dr. Hartzell, 2-3 points. One, again, on technology. I have a question again going into the ethics and your area from what little I understand. See, the technology of tomorrow, the robotics of tomorrow, right, and such, or the drones of tomorrow, no matter wherever they're developed, be it in China or India or America, right, they would have a core operating system. I go back to, let's say, an OS, right? They would have a core OS. Are you seeing any talk or any approaches in the wider science and technology areas wherein people are thinking of embedding an OS of ethics into the very programming of these devices? That's my question. Are you seeing are you seeing any, I mean, any development along those lines? Any thought on those lines?
You mean operating system, OS?
Yes, the software itself, the programming, let's say the programming, notionally, the programming
like say AI, like say an AI car that has to choose between, say, hitting a person crossing the road or damaging the people in the car, something like this? Is this
Exactly. Or let's say if a drone can be given a command that you, okay, fine, you go ahead and self-destruct in that building, right? Will the drone OS create a red flag and create a circuit breaker on that?
I see.
Okay, and not execute, because so that's the ethics and yeah, that's the OS that I want you to understand if you're seeing any of that in any of your studies. So
Yeah, well, that's a question. These are questions right out of the core of, say, philosophy of technology, which is what I look at. I hadn't
true.
looked. I'm not an expert in that particular area, but of course we know about it. And well, take for example, what do you do when you have an AI-driven car? Right now, we have kind of weak AI, so you can call it an AI. And incidentally, saying that computers are intelligent is like saying, like submarines can swim. So I'm quoting Alan Turing. It's an interesting use of terms. But anyway, within this context, does the AI car choose between, say, avoiding hitting someone in the street but crashing and hurting the people inside its car, or does it go ahead and hit the person in the street and save the people in the car? Well, I think this actually happened somewhere with one of the electric cars and that's out, and that's a very difficult question. With a human driving the car, the person may have been able to avoid the entire situation. So we have to. So I think maybe your question is, can the AI have ethics? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fair
But
enough. Thank you so much.
can we develop an AI that a robotic system that can be integrated with a human that could significantly reduce the risk that even beyond what we would see now? Like, say, for example, in the Da Vinci machine for surgery, you can do surgery with this Da Vinci machine. It has these kind of probes that go in, and the doctor sits inside of the machine and manipulates the probes to do the surgery. A machine like that can eliminate any movement of the doctor's hands, and these kinds of technologies. So that would be much more precise than having a surgeon doing regular surgery. So it depends on the situation, and the surgeon has to make the decision. But that machine would be something. But the physician is actually making the decisions, not the machine. The machine is correcting for any aberrations in the physical system that we have, which would be the nervous system of the physician and the patient.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. I mean, we were getting deeper into it. I think we can have a separate 1 hour discussion on the philosophy of technology, as you're saying, and the operating systems and the AI, the training of the AI for the machines of tomorrow. Thank you so much. Dr. Lakhvinder Singh, if you would like to comment anything on what Dr. Hartzell was mentioning, that's one. Second is now back to the geopolitics. And to one initial question, at the overall security balance or the military balance. Do you think that China has been shown a red flag in terms of military balance and its adventures in the South China Sea? And as actually I was hearing a term, folks are now talking about it as West Pacific Sea rather than South China Sea. Some people are promoting that terminology now, the Western Pacific. But anyway, that's it. So do you see that as the outcome of the Quad meetings of yesterday, China would have taken some warnings?
No. I'm very disappointed. China should have been given clear warning. That's the whole point I'm trying to say today, that Quad should be used especially for military purposes, especially should be used to stem China. We should not delete it, we should not dilute it. Other issues like climate change, vaccine distribution, and other cooperation should be kept for other platforms. Yesterday, there was a clear statement from the Admiral Philip Davidson. He's the head of Pentagon's Indo-Pacific Command. He said very no uncertain terms that he's losing edge from China. He said in very clear statement that he's losing edge, and if something is not done, there's nothing he will be able to do. So
So
this
then,
is very
Sure. Then may I ask you, Dr. Singh, then from what you're saying, a natural outcome could be is that you like to see then the Quad as something like a NATO one, perhaps, or moving towards that one. But secondly, then what happens to complications as we just discussed with Japan and Australia? Would Japan want to kind of see right now under the Quad umbrella? Japan is coming along and economic and focus on these issues. If it's purely a military thing, do you think Japan Australia, okay, Australia is a bit far, so maybe the military shadow doesn't reach Australia in some ways, but Japan is very much in the shadows of China. So, do you think Japan would be then proactive if it was purely a military security get together?
No. Again, you should please try to read between the lines. What I'm saying, China is using its economic power to increase its military influence. See, for the first time in human history, non-military is being used to increase the military influence. So this is a very first time situation,
Right.
So we have to come out with a counter strategy which works on these lines. Okay. Now, for that we have to increase our economic coordination between four countries. So we have to first of all we have to study our coordinations, our complementaries, our strengths, and our good points. Then we have to see how can we get our help from China, from Japan, from Australia. Until we don't coordinate our complementaries, we cannot contain China. So we must study where the challenge is coming, from where the threat is coming. So that is
Sure.
why, as I told you, Japan can help us. Now, suppose how can Japan has Japan has good universities. Japan has good scientific infrastructure base. And we have good professors, good scholars. If we start inviting us to Japanese universities, and we can produce very good research papers and good
Sure.
technologies. So that kind of technology, that kind of help has. So we have to cooperate at that level. Now Japanese have a lot of economic infrastructure, which is investment technology, which they can give to us. I mean, strategic investment, strategic education. What I'm saying? Strategic investment, strategic education, strategic training, strategic military preparations. Everything, everything is being done keeping China in mind.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Dr. Singh. Absolutely. And maybe that will help me shape my question to Dr. Hartzell now. Uh, I mean, as Dr. Lakhvinder Singh is saying, on the one hand, Dr. Singh, I would think that folks who go in for such summits and all, they would have done a lot of such studies and, analysis, uh, scenario building, as you're mentioning. Perhaps, of course, since we do not know what's happening behind the curtain, we do not know. But yes, the takeaway from the perceptions is as what you're saying. Now, coming to Dr. Hartzell, supposing, sir, role playing, we like to role play a little bit once in a while, right? If you were President Joe Biden going into the Quad, what would you want your partners like India, Australia, Japan to pony up? How would you expect and want them to kind of collaborate towards the vision that America has? And how much of a sense of investment? It seems, I mean, Biden is investing. This was his first major outing on the world stage, right? As a multilateral discussion. So, what would be your asks from your partners when you are going into this meeting, sir?
That's a difficult question. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to really come up with anything that would be helpful with this broadcast, simply because I don't speak as a politician. So I think I should pass to Professor Singh on that one, actually.
Sure. Okay, fine. So we'll take it to okay. Before we pass to Professor Singh, the same question. This was not a political question. This was just a question in terms of understanding what America wants out of the Quad, right? And in terms of, we all understand what it wants. Perhaps it wants to somehow contain China, but in that matrix, what do you think it is factoring in terms of what cooperation or collaboration it wants with each of the Quad countries?
Well, let me speak on the large level and then talk specifically to that one. Okay, so we're in the middle of a pandemic. The pandemic, we can clearly see that biologically we're connected. We can at least take that clear and present situation and extrapolate to the fact that we're faced with a new, not like what we can call biopolitics, but a new eco-politics that's going to happen if we just want to survive in any decent manner as far as living. So it would seem to me that the United States and the rest of the Quad would want to have good relations with China and with the rest of the world. And the particular differences, as you said, each nation or each country is going to have its own agendas. But these agendas are going to have to somehow be put together in a sense that are going to address and bring about within this new ecopolitics, if we want to have any sense of a future and maybe for the species. Now, so I would think that President Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President, would want to reach out in this particular way. And I'm going to go back to technology and economy. I think that this would be a great way, and knowledge, a great way to bring the Quad into the more of a integrated system. But also, I would say we want to expand this out globally, internationally. What I hear a lot is that China's going to be put on the defensive with a lot of, not that China's not acting intrusively. I don't want to deny this. We have to leave that up to the military commanders and the analysts and the strategists. But I think that what I would say from my particular position is that we would want to have integration and activity going on rather than militarism and militarizing space and all of the other stuff that we see. We want that money and that brain power to be worked into some type of new technological system for energy. We need to get away from fossils. So if the Quad is going to do anything, I would say to start working towards that kind of project, and by integrating with China and any other countries that are feeling in a position either of intrusiveness like they're doing or feeling left out, that you want to bring them in. So I'm thinking of in North Korea. I know your show's not about North Korea, but that's another issue that needs to be addressed drastically if we're talking about Japan and China and the rest of Asia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. You, I think, laid out some very profound points that whatever the perspective of the US is obviously meant to be a global one. And from the Quad, the outcomes are to be peace and tranquility. In fact, the words which are being said out is the real objective, in a sense. The issue is that the world politics are such that, working towards that perfection will take a lot of time and a lot of work, it seems. That said, please, folks, this is going Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live. We've been having some comments coming in saying great, good, interesting, etc. But we would love to have some questions come in so that our distinguished panel can answer the questions, as we are soon heading into the closing rounds in a couple of. The next round will be the closing round in that sense. First, Dr. Lakhvinder Singh. Now, would you like to comment something on what Dr. Hartzell was mentioning in terms of what the US objectives from this Quad mechanism are, and what do you think that how is the US kind of realizing that what level of enthusiasm is amongst the other three partners towards the picture which the US wants?
Actually, this is a very simple question, but answer is very difficult. Everybody want to know actually what USA want. Very confusing signals are coming from Biden. He started his foreign policy with the Quad, so it is a good sign. But before that, he set up the summit meeting with the Chinese representative in Alaska. So, what kind of signals are coming from USA? We don't know. So it's not easy to answer this question. What Americans are looking from Quad, and from the speech which President Biden gave yesterday in the opening ceremony, there is not much takeaway for people like us. People like us who study geopolitical situation very thoroughly, and people like me are very concerned. For us, there's nothing to take home. We as buried today as we were buried yesterday. So nothing to be happy. Nothing is coming up. He's not fusing it. He's not come up with any concrete plan. Concrete plan. What his plan of action is, neither economically, not militarily, neither not to counter China. So far, even they're not even trying to understand what kind of tools, what kind of strategies China is using to increase their influence in the region. I will in the next question I'll tell you what kind of strategy China is using to increase influence. So until we focus on those strategies, we cannot counter China. So yesterday's summit was for the person like me was empty. I don't know what happened inside the doors, behind the doors. That I cannot say. So I after that I'm ready to accept maybe something happened. But as well about what was shown in the public, there's nothing to be revised. So I'm not getting any encouraging signals from President Biden.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Singh. May I now come to Dr. Hartzell? So you're sitting in Thailand, Bangkok, right? How do you see the non-coordinations in East Asia looking at these developments? Are you getting any sense of, are they following it? Of course, everybody follows the geopolitics very seriously in these parts of the world because a lot would be dependent. But are you seeing, what are you seeing? Would you have any observation from the non-Quad or ASEAN countries? How are they looking at this development?
Right. Well, ASEAN's quite interesting. It's right between India and China, and there's a long history in all of the different countries around. And well, take for example, what you might be looking for here is something a country like Vietnam. There's the Asian Tigers model that comes from back when Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand and so forth were developing. If you take a look at Vietnam right now, they've had a very good response to the pandemic. At the same time, they have very good technology development coming along, and it's a country that's not given much attention, but I think it will be in the near future. The Philippines also, of course, this is already known, but the Philippines and Indonesia are coming along quite rapidly. Thailand, Singapore, of course, also. Thailand is having some political difficulties, but I do expect that Thailand is quite, or the Thai officials and scientists and people that are making decisions are aware of the necessity to keep up with science and technology, to keep up with what's going on in the Indochina region and so forth. Myanmar, of course, is having severe difficulties that we're seeing in the press, and I don't really have any information there because I look at technology and science and so forth. But I think that yes, there's a lot of difficulties, climate change, political problems, problems with the energy systems, but it looks quite exciting, and the way that the pandemic's been addressed with the public health systems, and then the social development and aspects that are going on. If India can move towards what Professor Singh is talking about with the economy and spending in the right areas, making the right choices and the right technologies, I think that India would be a very exciting place. I've never been to India, but I'm looking forward to going. It's an exciting place, deep culture. I just really am a big admirer of Indian culture. But like you said, I think there's a lot of problems, and how those are going to be worked out are really going to be challenges with what you're faced with right now, particularly with the BJP and the farmers and what needs to happen to even get the food system and the livelihoods taken care of so that you can develop and look at science and technology.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. Very well said. Well, India is very near from Bangkok, hardly a couple of hours flight. Come on by. We'll be happy to host you, sir.
Thanks.
Yes, there are challenges for all nations. And of course, we were looking at the ASEAN and the non-Quad nations that you said, because each one of them will be a player also. And it's the matrix, how it all settles down over a period of time. That be the key to, I think, the success of a Quad also. Dr. Singh, then I'll come back to you with the question that you were highlighting. How do you see China is coping or reacting or prepping itself to counter what the Quad is doing?
Okay, very good question. Uh, First, I would like to tell what kind of tools China is using to expand its influence. Okay, this is very important to know. China is not using its military, so this is very important. China is not attacking anybody, but still China is winning. So, what are those tools which China is using to win its way? So there are four things which I think, according to my thesis, China is doing. Number one is education. China is inviting a lot of students from the region to study in its universities. According to my data, there may be more than 200,000 students from this region studying in Chinese universities. And China gives them a lot of scholarship, a lot of funds. When these people study, go home, and they capture government positions, they become China friends. So this is one of the most powerful tool which China is using now. Most China is have captured almost all students from the region. Korea, Japan, study every country. You will see how many students are studying China, and when they come back, they become China fans. They become China, lovers. And that here our so-called Quad doing nothing. We're not doing any help to each other. We're not inviting Japanese students. We are not inviting Indian students. We are not inviting Australian students. So our intake of foreign students is very zero. Here I propose that Quad should do something to invite from each other students. Students play a very important role because today's students play very important role in possibility tomorrow. So we should not ignore this. Number two, China is using strategic tourism. Strategic tourism. A tourist. China is flooding the region with a tourist. When they go there, they start appreciating their culture, their people, their economy. They come home with a lot of ideas what to do with them. So, but we are not sending our people to Japan. So, Quad is we are just sitting tight. Yeah. But China is sending millions of its people to all these countries to know what this country is. No, so-called this tourism are not tourism. They are observers. They are studying these regions. What kind of economic opportunities are there? What kind of people habits are there? So strategic tourism, Chinese tourists are much more than tourists. They're trying to develop closer relationship with the region. So Quad should come out with this kind of pulse strategy that we should have a more tourism among each other. But so far, our tourism is almost non-strategic at all. We're not using tourism as a strategic asset. Third, not long ago, USA was used to be the biggest aid giver in the region. But now, USA is the biggest, so China is the biggest aid giver in the region. China is giving a lot of aid to the political parties, to the governments in the region. So, but China uses that aid to build friendships, become more and more friends in the region. China invites a lot of politicians to its capital every year. Free capital, free stay, free time. Thousands of politicians visit China, Beijing, and stay, have a free host, treatment, guest treatment. So it is spending a lot of money, lot of funds to win over these local politicians from the region. But our Quad is completely silent about this. You know what I'm saying? We
Mhm.
have failed to follow counter China. So we have to come out with this kind of strategic plan through which we can invite politicians from Japan, politicians from Australia to our, and they stay 1 month, 2 months, or long time, not just one day to visit. Become our
Sure.
friends. So
Mhm.
longer stay is very important. So, but China is doing that. China is doing that. China is inviting lot of young leaders from the region and staying in Beijing, and they will sometimes be fully paid. Number last point is strategic trading, strategic investment. For China, trade is not just about money. Trade is not investment is not just profit. Chinese are spending a lot of money where they just give away many things to the region countries, just to make friends. But we are always focusing on profit, always focusing on market. So that is why I am trying to say Quad is almost empty. There's no clear cut strategy to counter China. We are
Can I
just
can I Can I respond to Professor Singh?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes, please.
I think what you're describing here is really interesting phenomena that the Chinese use, and is very effective.
Yes.
What the Chinese do is they put in massive infrastructure, and once that massive infrastructure is, then they allow the companies and the innovators to compete, and then they select the ones that are the best and so forth.
Yes.
And the other model you're talking about, if you have everybody competing, you can't get anything done. I mean, you may get some things done, but this vicious kind of competition at every level isn't going to do it. The Chinese say, well, wait a minute, okay, stop all that. We'll put in all this infrastructure, massive high-speed trains, all levels of trains, transportation. We'll put in the scientific labs. We'll get the innovators in there, and then competition happens. So it's almost like you have a communism type base with, then you have competition on top of that, which would make sense because you have to eat before you can actually think and do the work that's got to happen. I think that's the power of that particular system.
So the point I was trying to make, that we must learn the concept of strategic trading and strategic investment. So in one way, what I'm saying, we should learn from China how China is using its strategy to increase their influence. And so for the first time in human history, a country is expanding its influence, military influence, without using military. You understand?
Sure.
But so far, that's what again and again I'm coming to the same point. Quad was created to stop or contain China's influence in the region. But so far we are doing nothing. We are doing nonsense things like vaccine, climate change. Climate change is not Quad. It's different thing. But these people are full of they bullshit. They come out with all this crap because they buy, because they are bankrupt. They are not using the politicians and officials who are crafting our strategy. They are bankrupt. They just work for salary. They don't love our country. I'm openly saying it. They're just to fill a job. They just fill the jobs. They are just filling the positions and get some good students. They're not applying their mind. They're not studying what China is doing. We have to come out with a very creative strategy, creative policy to contain situations very grim.
Thank you. Sure. I absolutely, heard and noted, Dr. Singh. In fact, while you were highlighting the points, some similar points we have been making actually over a number of years also. You mentioned that inviting students, that how China is inviting students, and that becomes its wealth in a way down the line. Is the same thing with the United States. You see, talent got attracted to the United States, and why the US is an innovation economy, a dynamic economy, a dynamic society, is because of the talent which it could attract as a magnet, right? And then that talent would then go back to their home countries also, or majority would stay there, contribute to the progress and technology innovation, and the ones who. So China is doing the same. The only thing which was holding back China maybe was the language issue, but then within at least the Asian region or the Eastern Asian countries, the cultural affinity is more with China, and China is leveraging that. Absolutely, yes. And whereas in India, we don't have any such foreign students as a strategy, which is a revenue base also, by the way. Second, you mentioned tourism. We had a slightly different take on the issue of tourism. Yes, the perspective was that India could be doing a lot more to attract Chinese tourists to India. I mean, apart from any geopolitical aspects, because the point being that if we get more and more Chinese tourists coming to India, maybe they can see the democracy, the vibrance, the argumentative, open society of India. The more of them see this and go back over a period of time, perhaps the idea of a free society would grow within the Chinese citizenry. So promoting Chinese tourism into India for me was that particular aspect also, because when people come, they say, wow, India, such open newspapers, such a society, and when they go back, they could carry some of that and generate goodwill for India, as well as question their own authoritarian regime. And the point of delegations and all, absolutely yes. China does that a lot. Young leaders and party leaders, inviting them and taking them, etc. So either the point I think that you're making is that it could be India, but if it's the Quad mechanism, then actually it's pretty interesting. Then the Quad countries together should kind of look at how to promote such activities, how to promote delegations within the regions and all. I think that's where you're heading. That's a beautiful point, sir. Now, yes, Professor Hartzell, your thoughts, please.
The country to follow on this would be the South Koreans. The South Koreans are expert at this particular aspect that you're talking about. If you look in Haiti, when there's a earthquake, or if you look anywhere in the world, the South Koreans will be there, and their students are in all the major universities in the world. They're really doing well. And another country that's following along is Vietnam. Vietnam is doing the same thing, and you're exactly right. I think that if India wants to advance, that's a perfect way to go. That's the next generation.
Yeah.
Very true. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely, Dr. Hartzell. I mean, you pointed out to something very relevant out there. Now, okay, last question in this round, and then we have a closing round with your wrap-up thoughts. Something on technology, Dr. Hartzell, and which has come up off and on in between. Like Dr. Lakwinder says that, okay, what is it that concrete we are planning to do other than the vaccines, right? On the vaccines, I would think that there is some roadmap which is developing, and we might see some real action on the ground on the vaccine. Money, Japan money, American from Johnson and Johnson and Novavax, those two technologies, and India setting up manufacturing facilities for the vaccine. So I can see that coming. But the second one, the one which I want you to identify, and you also mentioned you work on energy, of course, also, right? Now, given the lithium and cobalt supplies, other than other rare earths, China has a good grip on global supply chains of those materials. So we've been pushing actually a initiative within India where we were asking for more investments, like both of you are mentioning here, heavy investments in R&D in the non-lithium technologies. Right. See, I mean, and of course, a lot is happening in non-lithium, other solutions, aluminum, hydrogen fuel, etc., etc. But the point is that if the Quad could take a more proactive, pump in a lot of money, R&D innovations, and develop alternate technology routes, which are less dependent upon, raw materials or supply chains which China controls in a way, right? And in the process, you spin off newer technologies. So, Dr. Hartzell, what is your take on this? From the studies that you're doing around you, do you see in technology areas tech, more tech development or innovations in specifically, let's say, non-lithium technologies?
Well, lithium is a very specific matter, dealing with the particular batteries and so forth, and that has its own things. But I mentioned earlier nanotechnology, which is the real integral science, right? It's pretty much everything because we're dealing with materials. There you have Symbiosis Nanotech Institute there in Pune, near Mumbai. There's a lot of scientists there. One that I've worked with before that could answer a lot of these questions for India. So these are people that you have already there. These people went to study in different places, like say Sungkyunkwan University in South Korea. They bring back that information to Indian science. You just sent a probe to the moon. There's a lot that can be done if it's organized. And like I said earlier, it's going to have to be a strategic decision of where to put the resources, where to put your money and your scientists, what you're going to do, and technicians. But certainly in new energy development, like actual clean energy, not just another fossil regime that has, say, some solar photovoltaics and a few windmills. We need something that can absolutely replace the fossil systems that we have and the nuclear systems that we have, and go to something that's going to be relatively benign. And that's going to take a great effort. That's the area that I would look at. So energy, water purification systems, medical technology, vaccines, mRNA technology, biotechnology. I think those would be ones that I would look at, but it would have to be a working group. And science is a universal matter; it's an international matter. So there's going to have to be a lot of open sharing going on between the countries, and that's an ethical issue, a matter of justice, say global justice, that this sharing of knowledge happens. And then sharing of technologies until India can develop its own technologies, and off you go.
Thank you very much. Very well said, sir. I mean, a matter of ethics and equity, right? In that sense, that
And equity.
where is the equity in such technologies and development? Folks, whosoever is watching, please do keep in your questions coming. We do have likes are growing. but we would love to have any of your questions for our distinguished panel as we head into the closing round. Dr. Lakhvinder Singh, this is the closing round. You may please share your wrap-up thoughts and your takeaways or your giveaways from this conversation that we had. The next day after the first Quad Summit was held yesterday virtually, and the outcomes to the extent that are known to us. So, how would you sum up your closing thoughts? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, sir. My What I would like to say is that our politicians, our diplomats can spin it as much as they want. But any objective scholar, any objective observer will tell you we are doing nothing on the ground. Most of things, most of proposals which they have brought in are at that basic level. Nothing is being done to implement them. Until we become more creative and more thoughtful, we will not be able to achieve what we uh, attempted to achieve. China is very complicated case. Something like this has never happened before in history. So every talk can help you that much. So until unless we accept the ground reality, and Americans must accept that they are no more superpower. They are no more biggest economic power. They are no more biggest trading power in the region. They are no more most dominating military power in the region. So they must not expect too much. So when they craft their policy, they should know their limits. And they should know how much they can command respect, how much they can command obedience from their so-called partners. So situation is very changed. 10 or 20 years ago, USA was dominating militarily as well as economically. So they can order, do this. Now other regions, other countries are growing up. And China is very, very powerful now. So USA should know its limit. But so far, from the body actions, from their policies, we don't think uh, American politicians have taken the point home. They are no more strongest, biggest economic power in the region. Their military is not dominating. Unless they don't accept this kind of empty policy will keep coming. And nothing will be much done on the ground. So my last word is that we must get real. We must come out with some concrete plans to come out and to stop China's expanding. And this, especially this Quad platform, should not be diluted. Should not be diluted with other ideas, other conceptions. We should keep this platform specifically designed to keep our China thing in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. So very interesting and a very basic reminder. I mean, from your view, yeah, sure, you're arguing and pushing and you're looking for the thought leader, a pure mechanism which focuses on the issue of security and does not get diluted with too many other aspects woven into it. Fair enough, absolutely. Thank you so much for your thoughts. May I now invite Dr. Hartzell for your concluding remarks, sir, please.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and also with my friend Lakhvinder. I'm in significant agreement with his assessment and certainly the concern that Indians have with the border conflict and also the Navy situation with the Chinese vessels hitting down and out away from China. And I'll leave it up to him to do the analysis of that, but I certainly understand the concern. In the case of the Quad and building these relationships that are going to be based not so much on military power, but of course having the military there as a balancing aspect to provide security within which that you can share knowledge, particularly medical knowledge right now, but also technology, culture, and the students and everything that we've talked about. These are absolutely necessary. So long as I said, that we're looking at reaching out and with China to meet the challenges that are addressed for the entire globe now that we're dealing with. But even if we didn't have, say, an existential threats pressing in, such as nuclear weapons, which we didn't really talk about, which is a major issue in this whole matter. But even if we didn't have such a, like an existential threat from technologies, we would still want to have a world that where we would live in, that we had security, where we had clean water, clean air, clean soil, and then on up from there, where we have other enjoyments. It's a very simple matter. The complexity comes in, as we've talked about tonight. How do we get to that level of what we might call thriving or flourishing, but also addressing the problems that we're faced with? It's a very, very serious matter. And certainly we aren't going to come up with all the answers. Those are going to have to be worked out. But the way to go, I think, will be further spending on technology development, getting scientists skilled and trained. That takes time. It takes 10 years or 8 or 10 years to get that kind of scientific knowledge into the people and have them innovating and working. To build the structures, that takes time. And we don't have a lot of time before we're really having some other major issues, such as tidal surge into coastal cities, for example. So while the problems are serious and very worrying, at the same time, I think there's a cautious optimism that we have about what we can do if we do work together. And the Quad, as we've talked about tonight, has the knowledge, it has the wealth, it has the clout to move things along. And the United States should be involved in this and doing something, particularly since I'm from the United States. But we have that ability, and Biden and Harris are going to have to reclaim a better name for the United States moving forward with the better aspects, and not with some of the negative stuff that we didn't really need to go into. But you know where I'm headed with this. Just towards a better world, that we can meet the challenges that we have to meet, rather than bickering and fighting and all of that. That sounds idealistic, but we're going to have to do something, because it's like driving a toaster through a car wash right now. It's going to take a lot of finesse, a lot of precision, a lot of skill, and we may not make it. So we had better do something.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell. Very well summed up. I think one big picture takeaway which is emerging from this is that the point which both of you are making, let's say Dr. Lakhvinder is kind of emphasizing on it, the security aspect of the Quad relations and relationships. How much of meat is there to the security? How much of muscle is added to that? Perhaps that's one aspect. And the other aspect, as Dr. Hartzell has highlighted, and also Dr. Singh has been arguing, is that something in parallel maybe on technology development and investments in technology development. And of course, the third pillar would be perhaps a lot more of people to people, public exchanges on education, tourism, and such, which also in a way, help the economy, of course, right? Because that's revenues also, students and learnings also, as well as help to carry over ideas and exchange of ideas. A lot more of the points you highlighted very interestingly for us and our audiences. Thank you so much once again to Dr. Lane Hartzell, who is the research professor at the Center for Ethics and Science and Technology at the Chulalongkorn University at Bangkok. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, of course, to Dr. Lakhvinder Singh, professor and an expert on geopolitics and East Asian affairs based out of Seoul. That said, we now look forward to our next episode on Opto Politics in the coming weeks, probably again on a Saturday. And I thank all the audiences who came by, checked by. This would be available. This recording would be available on YouTube also, and we'll share it with you. Folks can go and check it out on YouTube or share with their colleagues and friends also. That being said, this broadcast